Welcome to the Overcoming Mediocrity podcast, where today's top influencers and entrepreneurs on the rise share empowering stories and ninja tips to become the fuel that ignites a positive change in your life. Our guests don't simply coast through life. They don't let difficult situations stop them. They set big goals, keep their eyes on the prize, and they're joining us today to share insider secrets you can use right now to step into your power and live your purpose. Now, here's your host, Christy Ruffino.
Our guest today is Sharmila Wijeyakumar. Her friends just call her Sam. Sam is Sri Lankan by ethnic origin, British by birth, and she's lived between North America and Europe for the last 21 years. Sam is a survivor of human trafficking, and her journey to healing was acquired through her faith in Jesus Christ and a passion to do something about this issue. She first fought human trafficking with Pro Nino, where she reduced the rate of child trafficking by 49% in 13 Spanish-speaking countries in the early 2000s. This effort led her to found Rahab's Daughter, which is a nonprofit that fights to prevent, rescue, and rehabilitate survivors of trafficking. She serves alongside her husband of 22 years and a daughter to prevent trafficking, as well as rescue and serve those who have been trafficked. She leads over 200 volunteers and employees across 3 states. Today, as well as leading her nonprofit, she works in the high-tech world of digital transformation for Veride. That is a software and professional service company. She serves enterprise organizations with the help of an amazing team. She's blessed to have the support and freedom to balance my faith, family, vocation, and passion, and I can't wait for you to get to meet Sam. Well, welcome to today's episode of the Overcoming Mediocrity podcast. And I have the honor of being able to interview a friend. She has also been a member of our community, the Dynamic Professional Women's Network, and she shared her story in one of our Overcoming Mediocrity books about adversity and everything she went through that put her on the path to being a really, really strong advocate for human trafficking. She is also actually a member of the church I belong to here, and she's really big in the community here as well as now nationally to raise awareness about this serious, serious problem in our world right now. So welcome, Sam, to the show. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you, Christy. It's really an honor to be here, and thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited today to be able to just, talk about what you know very well is my passion, which is anti-human trafficking.
Yes, absolutely. So I want to have the audience have the opportunity to learn a little bit about you, your journey, your story, and why this is such an important topic for you. So do you mind sharing a little bit of that with us today, Sam?
Absolutely. I'd love to. So, my journey started when, I was a teenager, and I was one of those kids who just absolutely loved to read, to study, to knit, to make her clothes for her dolls and whatever, which meant that, I was much better alone with my dolls and teddy bears than I was, socially apt. And so given that I had a lot of social skills issues, I was very quick to become the target of bullying. I didn't look like other kids. I didn't want to play sports. I didn't, I just really wanted to read my books and study and play with, my dolls and stuff. And that made me an easy target, right? Now, once you start getting bullied, you start believing that you are someone that should be bullied continuously. And so, I had no self-esteem. I allowed myself to not stand up for things that were important. And so that left me very vulnerable. As such, I tried to commit suicide. It had gotten to the point that I just couldn't anymore, and I tried to commit suicide. And I drank every pill that could be found in my household, I drank it. And I mean, it didn't work because obviously I'm still here. And, clearly it was God's plan that it didn't work because I, started throwing up all the pills and basically was so disappointed at that point that I thought, well, good Lord, I can't even do this right. So I ran away from home. And in doing that, I became one of those statistics that within 48 hours, I was trafficked. I got a job at what I thought was a nightclub. Turned out it was a brothel. And at the end of the first night, they, asked me to come upstairs because they said there was something wrong with the take on the till. And that was the end of that. I was, in the terms that we use, turned out, right? So basically, and I was forced to continuously provide sexual favors to people. And I was in and out of trafficking for 4 years. And I was trafficked by different individuals. The first time I got out, I thank God that a customer helped me to escape. The problem for me was my self-esteem was even worse than it had ever been before, because now I was disgusted by myself on top of everything else, right? And I didn't think I was good for anything. So I was easy prey for, folks to use and abuse me. And also, obviously I was a teenager when this happened. So I dropped out of high school. I had no, high school diploma as of yet. And so, what kind of job can you get with no high school diploma? So I actually did get a job selling encyclopedias door to door. Turned out that was a labor trafficking ring. So, this is the trouble. When you're vulnerable, it's very easy for people to prey on you. And so, in the end, I did get a high school diploma and I went off to college in Florida. And I was trafficked again because I was working in a restaurant setting at a private club. And when I let them know my story, they basically said, well, you service our clientele, you won't graduate college. So now I was back to the same situation. And it actually took a lot of people in my life, and particularly my church family, because I was beaten within an inch of my life and basically escaped very narrowly with my life. And then I was hidden. And my church family and folks had to hide me. And I remember the principal of my high school, helping out, and just so many folks, because I couldn't have anything in my name. I couldn't, do things that normal people could do because I was being hunted. And so for all of these reasons, Rahab's Daughters is an organization that I put together with the help of my family and friends in the community, because I don't want anyone to have to deal with that again, right? And if we can prevent it, prevention for me is way more important than cure. Cure is important, and we definitely do some rehabilitation and rescue work and, all sorts of things. But for us, prevention is key. And part of that is educating the public on what human trafficking looks like. And it doesn't look the way people think it will, Christy. So that's, always important.
Yeah, I've heard so many stories from you throughout the years of victims, and obviously you're not sharing their names or anything, but just stories about situations that you and your team have dealt with. And it's definitely heartbreaking. And so when I go back to the beginning, there are a lot of people listening right now that have children that can identify with who you were as a child, the introvert, the shy, the quiet, let's face it, I'm an introvert too, and half of the population can identify as being an introvert, really. So what can we do, or how can we empower our parents right now? What can you give them for advice as far as seeing those warning signs of taking that shyness and then having them reach out for help that is in an unsafe way?
No, for sure. I mean, we are literally this weekend moving into new offices in Barrington that are right by the high school. And we sort of selected that on purpose because we want to be able to provide more programming for, teaching introverts behaviors that will help, for anti-bullying information for treating those. Because also in my case, had someone recognized the level at which the bullying and the ostracizing had taken upon me, it would have changed things greatly if someone had started treating that, right? But as it wasn't recognized, it became worse and worse, because the more you internalize the stuff, the worse it gets, right? So, just being able to say to parents, okay, so you're seeing cyberbullying, or you're seeing, which is a problem today, then reach out, right? Call a hotline, ask for resources. We have tons of them, and you can immediately get some assistance to deal with these sorts of things. Secondarily, if you are seeing cyberbullying, definitely report that to the platform that you're seeing it on. And there's different steps that you can take to take that stuff down, so it's not, continuously hurting your teen. But then we also offer a free class called Technology and Trafficking that parents can take. And highly recommend that they take this class. We just did one Monday night, but there's one every month, and you can just register online to join it. And it teaches parents how technology helps us and how technology hurts us, and gives them tips on how to work with their young folks on making sure that they are protecting their household, right? And we also have another class called the Trafficking End Zone, and households can get certified as traffic end zones, which means that we teach them how to do things like configure their router to make sure that stuff they don't want coming in the house isn't coming in the house, and how to detect it if it is coming in, and how to talk to your teens about it, or your husband, if that's who's bringing it in, or your wife, or whoever it is, because people think that pornography is only watched by men. It's not true. Lots of women watch it too. Teenagers definitively watch it. And we want to make sure that we understand how to stop that. And we have different things that you can work with to stop that. But also, if you have issues, like if you think your teen is addicted to pornography, or you think you're addicted, or whatever, we have ways that we can help with that as well, because it's the starting point. And since COVID occurred, there's been a 50% uptick in solicitation for people online. And so it is even more important now than ever that we protect folks, and that households understand how to protect themselves.
Great. So I think the first cause here, the first course of action here, is to make sure that our kids are protected, and more importantly, that we're in touch with their feelings and what's going on in their life. So if they are bullied, or if they're, just faced with challenging things, that they can keep their self-esteem high. There's always going to be situations, from what I've heard with this whole human trafficking thing, where people kind of get caught up in it, like accidentally. But beyond that, if we can protect our kids so they can be more confident and not go down those paths, that would probably be the first step.
Yep. And recognizing it, right?
Yeah.
What does grooming look like online? And I was literally playing a game today, and I play games not because I'm a gamer, but because I want to see the, human trafficking happening on some of these gaming platforms.
Yeah.
And, you get really interesting outreaches, right? And, obviously they're not sure if I'm an adult or a child, because I've put no real identifying information there on purpose, because I don't want to mislead people, but at the same time, I want to see, what's happening, right? And I get all sorts of strange outreaches, and this particular game was one with a lot of little pets and animals and stuff in it. So something that a young girl might want to play with, because she gets to, have, a pet type thing. And already there's definitely people playing it who are looking and who are predatory, right?
Predators, yeah.
Exactly. And so recognizing what that predator looks like, understanding the term catfishing and what does it mean and what does it look like, which means basically someone pretending to be who they're not online for the purposes of phishing something from someone else, right? So we want you to know what that looks like, and also how to go about investigating if this person is real or not, right? And there are tools that we can give you to help you figure that out. And just, and that's important not just for children, but for folks who are dating, right? On dating apps are huge places that human trafficking takes place. And especially, our second vulnerable population after children are women who are coming out of traumatic relationships, domestic violence, or really ugly divorces are prime targets for traffickers. And, we at Rahab do a lot of work with women with children. And so we see that story over and over again. And it is so easy for somebody to be susceptible to what we would call a Romeo trafficker, or somebody who tends to think, make you think that they love you when really they just want you to do things for them.
Yeah. Yeah. That's kind of what I meant when I said accidentally, but it's not really, you don't know what you're getting into. So if you don't mind, let's take a short little break. And I would really like for us to dive deep now a little bit more into what we can do to protect ourselves and protect our children. And then share a little bit about how that works with that Romeo trafficker, because I have heard stories about that. And I remember when I was going through a divorce, how vulnerable I was. And if the wrong person would have gotten a hold of me, who knows what kind of a web I would have gotten caught in.
Yep.
So, all right. Well, if you don't mind, we'll hang on one moment and we'll be right back.
You're listening to the Overcoming Mediocrity podcast, where you learn to step into your power and live your purpose. Now back to the show with your host, Christy Ruffino.
All right. Well, welcome back. I'm here, Sam from Rahab's daughter. And I know we've had a great conversation already. We talked about your story, Sam, and how you got kind of caught up in the whole thing more than once, it sounded like. I know I read your story and you went into a little more detail about that specific situation and how you got out of it. And I've heard you speak many times. But let's talk about different scenarios that we may not necessarily know. I did not know anything about this. I just thought it was a simple case of, maybe people doing this with children, but it can happen with adult victims and male victims. And so maybe share a few different kind of victim MOs that will kind of help us maybe expand our knowledge and what is possible with this whole terrible thing.
There are three kinds of traffickers in the world, Christy. So the first is what we call a guerrilla trafficker. He's that guy from the movie Taken who just kidnaps people, right? Yep. And my first trafficker was one of those, right? So, and then our second type of trafficker is your Romeo trafficker, who basically the whole point is to find you either in person or online and basically go into your vulnerabilities and make you feel like he's the answer to all of those issues. And then you fall in love, and now he has control over you, because human trafficking is coercion, right? And it's not what people think. It's not people chained to a bed. It's actually mental coercion, right? And forced through intimidation and other factors, not really chains of that nature, which is why it happens in pure daylight, out in the open, and nobody notices, right?
And the threat is of exposure, correct?
Threat is of exposure or family harm. So in my case, it was, if you don't do this, then we're going to get your little sister and make her do it. And we're going to kill your parents. And, at that age, your brain hasn't developed enough that you understand in the rational brain the repercussions that are going to occur to them, and that this is all part of their game, right? So, but you don't have that capacity. So, you're just stuck. And our third kind of trafficker is what we call a CEO trafficker. And he makes you think that it's a business deal between you and him. But in the end, most of the girls very rarely get any money from this or anything. And so what we see more so is the Romeo trafficker these days. And he tends to have, 4 to 6 girls working for him. And they tend to be bringing him about $250,000 a year. So it's a very lucrative business, right?
And this is like how these are like, freshly divorced women, or even housewives, right? Because once they go and play around on their husband, now they're trapped for fear of exposure.
Yep. And the biggest trick of coercion we see is women who are in a divorce situation, like the divorce isn't final and it's probably nasty, and the traffickers realizes that they have kids, and now he threatens them with, I'm going to expose you and you're going to lose your kids.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
What
They'll
mother
do anything.
Well, exactly. Mothers will do anything, right, to keep their kids. And so now they feel completely stuck. And I have everything from professors at universities who've done this to, nurses, to educators, to, like, it happens everywhere. And actually, one of the young woman who runs our Moms Against Trafficking prevention side of things, her daughter was trafficked from church. Like, literally, the family came to
Wow.
and you'll have to hear her story sometime, but like, literally, it is like, it happens everywhere. Don't believe that only a certain demographic or a certain culture or a certain, no, it happens
Right.
everywhere. In fact, close to 45% of victims trafficked are Caucasian. So it's a problem for everyone, right? It's not a minority only issue, and it's not a socioeconomic issue. My dad was a CFO of a large multinational. Trust me when I tell you it's not a socioeconomic issue, right? It can happen because there are what we call childhood ACEs, right? So adolescent risk factors that occur that make it more likely. And some of those things are things that happen all the time: bullying, divorce, a death of an important person in the family, anything that makes your kid vulnerable in any way can lead to the ability for a trafficker. And it can be something as simple as they just had a giant fight with their best friend and they're talking about it online, or they just broke up with their boyfriend who was their first love and they're exposing that to other people. These are the things. So people don't think that traffickers are sophisticated, but they are. They have wonderful bots online that are looking for these sorts of things on social media, on other things, to alert them to someone who is vulnerable, right? And this is what we need to think about, and what we need to make sure our kids are thinking about, because everybody's living out loud on social media now, and that makes us bigger targets. So we have to know the signs in order to protect ourselves, right?
Yeah, it's very easy for us who have not been affected by this, to think that it's out there. But when I heard the statistics between, was it firearms, drugs, and human trafficking, what is human trafficking rated?
It's the second fastest criminal industry in the world, second only to drug trafficking right now, and has surpassed arms trafficking.
Yeah.
And has a lot to do with the fact that many of that is intertwined, right? A lot of trafficking victims are controlled through drugs as well, right? And forced to do things that they wouldn't do. And it is a problem. Like, we see so many who are addicted to heroin because heroin makes it easy to control them, because it's so addictive that, they need it. And so they will do literally anything you ask to get that heroin fix. But that's not every girl we see is addicted to drugs, though. So it's not only that way, but that's definitely one way that traffickers control their victims.
Yeah. So when we look at those statistics and those numbers and the money that's involved, of course, they're going to have high technology to be able to find these people. Of course, they're going to be, this is a huge financial industry for these people. So, all right. So what do we do to recognize signs? Because there may be people that we cross paths with every day who may be caught up in something like this. So what can we do to recognize the signs? And then the next step will be, what can we do to help them?
Yeah. So, depending on what your work is, there are different ways to look. So if you're in the airport and you're traveling, please look for signs of people not really having good clothing for the environment that they're in, not wanting to answer you or look you in the eye, don't seem to be in control of their own identification. They're not wanting to make eye contact with you. If they buy anything at the airport, someone else is buying it, or they don't, It's a cash transaction, which a lot of people don't really do anymore, right? And then from a workplace situation, if you go into a beauty salon, a restaurant, a nail place, is the person able to communicate with you in English? Are they looking you in the eye? When you ask them a question, are they answering it directly, or is somebody else answering it? Is there always someone sort of peering over them or coming to check on them, or that kind of thing? Do they work unusually long hours? And is the price of the thing that of the service that you're getting a little too cheap to be good? You know what I mean? And people are like, oh my gosh, I found the best deal. I got my nails done. They did a manicure and a pedicure for $20. And I'm looking and I'm like, where was that? Because I want to write that down and go investigate the place, right? Because to me, that is a sign of human trafficking. Because if you're paying good wages and it takes an average hour to do a manicure and a pedicure, if you paid $20 for it, that means this person, right? And if the minimum wage in Illinois is $15 an hour, right? Then explain to me how that just made sense. And I'm not asking you to become a mathematician. I'm just asking you, does that make sense, or does it sound too good to be true? And just because it's a good deal for you, are you willing to support a human trafficker?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. All right. What other signs? Say maybe somebody in our family, a friend, somebody we work with.
If somebody is head over heels for someone, and they're getting a lot of gifts and different things, and then things change all of a sudden, that's a really important sign to look for, right? They suddenly become depressed, but they're still with the person. Other things would be they have a lot of stuff that they definitely cannot afford. So, like, where is it coming from and how are they getting it? Because that could be the beginning of the grooming stages, because oftentimes the beginning is giving them gifts and making them feel like they're super important and the only one in the world who can do these sorts of things for them. And if you can cut it off there, you're cutting it off at the pass, because the next stage of the grooming process will be, turning them out and forcing them to do things in repayment of this stuff, right? So, or they use other techniques as well. So that's definitely something to look for. In your children, I mean, make sure that you 100% know who they're going out with. We've seen cases across the country where, parents thought their kids were going to dance camp or soccer camp or whatever, but they were actually being taken to places and trafficked. So know what your kids are doing, and know, who their friends are. Make sure that you have seen them face to face, that you know their parents, that you understand, where they're going. And I always say to parents, like, I understand that you can't be at every dance recital or every soccer game, but have a pod of parents that are responsible for no more than 3 to 5 children, whose job it is to keep an eye on those 3 to 5 children. Because if you've got a football team or a hockey team or whatever, there's a lot of kids on it, and the coach cannot possibly know everything that's going on. So we as parents need to think about how we're going to do this to make sure that our kids are safe.
Great. What about medical professionals? Because I'm sure they cross paths with people who they think may be in something like this. How do they know? And what do they do? What do they do?
187% of victims who've been trafficked say that they needed medical attention for a laceration, for a head wound, for, sometimes a stabbing or a gunshot or whatever. Now, gunshots tend to be reported to the police, but a lot of the more I fell down the stairs and cracked my head open kind of lacerations aren't necessarily thought through. But a lot of times when they report because they're pregnant or have an STD or think they might have, something going on, a lot of these are missed. But it's important for medical professionals to get training. And some of the things that they should look out for is the person allowed to talk to their medical profession alone by themselves? That's a critical one. Do they seem overly fearful of getting treatment for, what theoretically should be a simple, head laceration or, bump or bruise or whatever, and yet they're really, really scared of treatment? These are things we should be looking deeper into. And also, examine your patients for other things. We had a case where they had been putting the girl's feet into a bucket of rats so the rats would bite her to keep her under control. But nobody ever took her shoes and socks off, so nobody ever noticed all the bites on her feet, because they don't want to hurt the merchandise in areas that, are going to stop them from being
Sellable.
exactly. And
Yeah.
so your child keeps their shoes and socks on all the time. It's worth taking a look at. Another thing is someone who never combs their hair, right? So it's because they probably have been beaten in the back of the head and their hair is hiding it. And so, if it's super messy, it's because it hurts, right? And so a lot of times girls won't comb their hair because, this is another way in which they can control them with pain, right? And
Yeah.
so,
Wow.
just really good things for medical professionals to look out for.
All right. Well, we only have a few more minutes left, but I do want to bring up the topic of Super Bowl, because when I first heard of your Super Bowl efforts, I couldn't understand why. And then, but of course, I thought it was me because I'm not a big sports person. But just recently, I had somebody else saying the same thing. They asked, well, why Super Bowl? Like, what makes it such a high traffic event? So, can you share a little bit about that? Because I think there's a lot of people that don't understand the dynamics of a Super Bowl or a big sporting event like that, and how this is a prime hunting ground.
Anytime that you bring a lot of people to a city for something like a sporting event, whether it's the Olympics, Super Bowl, the hockey, the World Cup, whatever, you're bringing folks on a leisure trip. And we have some idea that this idea of boys will be boys has kind of infiltrated these sorts of trips. And so we see them, hiring strippers, going to clubs, and unfortunately, demand equals supply. So if traffickers know that demand is going to enter a city, they're going to bring the supply. And last year, we actually saved a young lady who called. So we run a 24-hour call center, and people are able to call in, and we call and text the ads. And she texted us asking for help. And she had been brought from Nebraska down to Miami to, basically work Super Bowl, and ended up in Tampa Bay. And she was terrified because she had come thinking she was going to be a model for his plus sized jeans company, which was a real company. She had checked it out and everything. But within the first day, she was taken to a party and then turned out. So she was forced to have sex with people at the party for money that he got. And then the rest, she had been trafficked now for 6 days when we were able to rescue her with the help of the hotel and law enforcement. And then we were able to reunite her with her family back in Nebraska. But I mean, she literally answered an ad to come down and be a model at Super Bowl. And she wasn't the only one. There were so many we met during the course of Super Bowl last year that had that very same experience. And it's just simply a matter of supply and demand. And so we say stopping the demand is one of the top things that needs to be done. And we actually ask men to take a pledge not to buy humans because it is a real issue.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Sam. Well, I want to thank you for joining us. We really need to get you back again, because I know we just scratched the surface of this. But if anybody is listening to this episode, how do they get all of the great resources you share? Because you talked about your technology and trafficking class and a couple other classes. I know not only do we want to inform and educate people about this, but then we have people that may want to support you. So how can they get involved?
Yep, they can either go to our website, rahabsdaughters.org, or they can find us. We're on Facebook, we're on LinkedIn. So, any social, or they can call our hotline, which is 1-833-4-NEW-DAY, and they'll be able to reach us, and we'll be happy to help.
Can you explain what Rahab's daughter is? Because I think some people may want to understand that as well. Because at first I'm like, is that your daughter? Did you have a daughter named Rahab? And then I thought about it a little bit more. So share that story real quick.
Yeah. So Rahab was a woman in the Bible who helped some of God's people, take down the walls of Jericho, and she hid the spies. And then she ended up turning her life around and marrying a centurion. And she was one of the 5 women mentioned in Matthew 1:1 for the lineage of Christ, right? So she's one of the only 5 women who are mentioned there. And for me, that was very significant. Obviously, she was a prostitute who lived in the walls of Jericho. She was ostracized and obviously had a giant scarlet letter A, and yet she was able to do something amazing with her life and, have basically Jesus come out of her lineage. So that for me, is how Rahab's Daughters came to be the name of our ministry, because I just felt really, in touch with that story and just the redemption of it.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you so much, Sam, for joining me, and keep going strong with your mission. I know you've faced a lot of obstacles throughout the years, and I know these people do not want you to continue, but I know God's got your back. You've got a great team of family supporters, dogs. I know you got your dogs that help you out there with the saving the people and bringing them in. So just keep holding strong, and we're here supporting you.
Thank you so much, Christy. It's a pleasure to be here. Talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening to the Overcoming Mediocrity podcast, where we believe that everyone can have the business and life of their dreams once they've learned the art of mastering their story. Mastering our stories is the key to everything we want in life. Our stories can either hold us back or they can propel us to new heights. We can choose. You can choose. Choose to overcome mediocrity with us. Let's achieve greatness together. To learn more, visit www.overcomingmediocrity.org. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast.